This video is about 3 lessons that I'm learning in my first year of business as a full-time consulting arborist. Technically, I started my business over a year before that, but I was still employed by a different company, and only this year am I solely dependent on my business for income. Lesson number 1, to know my worth and be willing to walk away from a project or a client at any stage. This is a very luxurious position to have, and you do have to have some financial security to be able to take this position. So in order to make this work for me, I saved 6 months of expenses, both personal and business, in a business emergency fund so that I could maintain my self-worth. And this can play out at different stages. So right when I started my business, I was still employed by a different company, and so I wasn't dependent on the income yet. I had a client reach out to me, and he wanted a proposal for an arborist report, and he was very specific about what he wanted. When he was saying, I'm going to build my landscape project like this, I'm going to keep all my trees, and this or that is going to happen. I told him, there's a chance that you're going to have to redesign your project. And he just said no. He said, no, I'm not changing it, but I'm also not going to remove those trees. And from there, it just got worse. He also said, can you compromise on your price? Can you compromise on your timing? And I said no to both of those things. And after I ended that call, I immediately called another consulting arborist, and I was like, hey, this is a red flag, right? I gotta walk away, right? And she helped me through it. And I actually emailed him and said, I'm not interested in your project. I'm rescinding the proposal. I'm not going to be available. And he ended up sending me multiple emails afterwards saying, oh, you're the right person for this project. Can we talk about it? And I finally had to say very, very explicitly, I'm not working for you. It's not an option. Find someone else. And he finally did back off at that point. But if I hadn't been employed by someone else and I really needed that money, I might have gotten myself into something where the client's not going to be happy with anything I put in the report. Maybe they won't pay their bill. There's all kinds of things that could happen when you already know that a client is showing some red flags. Another situation I had was with a client who accepted my proposal, and I was all the way done with the arborist report, but my payment terms is that I won't send you the report until you pay me. And this is different from the way a lot of larger companies operate, including the one that I was working for. And this client had worked with me at that past company before. A lot of companies will say, okay, we'll do the report, we'll send it to you, and then basically the client gets to pay whenever they want. I can't do that because I can't have tons of money floating out there. I need the money to come in. And the only leverage I have is my report. So if I don't deliver it until I get paid, then it forces them to pay me on time. And he tried to argue with me, even though he had seen the terms. I was very clear about it. He tried to ask for a draft. He tried to say, I'll pay you tomorrow after I take a look at it. And I just said no to all of that. But he was being very difficult and honestly insulting. And this is not surprising based on the experience that I had with him at the previous company. So finally I told him, I'm not gonna compromise on my terms at this point. I was very clear with all of this from the beginning. It's on the proposal, and if it doesn't work for you, then I'm willing to walk away. I'll just consider that all the time that I've spent is a loss, and you can find another arborist. So this obviously is only gonna work if you're willing to forego the time and money that you've spent on that project. But there is some leverage in there because most people, they have some reason that they want that report. So only use this if you're actually willing to walk away from all that money. And there was a third client who had accepted my proposal, and as part of the proposal, because it was an open-ended construction monitoring proposal, I had a suspicion that, they're going to take a long time to pay because it's an architect firm. That normally happens. So I'm going to be lenient. I'll do a net 60, meaning the payment's due 60 days after I send the invoice out. Well, they decided to just take their time. It was like 90 days, and I was emailing them and saying what's going on. And fortunately, in my proposal, I put, if you're not paying the invoices, then I'm going to stop work. And that did force their hand, and they did ultimately agree to 60 days. And that was also a situation where I had already done some work. So am I willing to walk away from this money that I earned already? I was willing to do it. I don't like doing that stuff, but I think it is also a good lesson in the future if I had an employee or something like that, to let them know that I'd rather walk away from that money than to let a client push you around. Yeah, this is an ongoing process. It probably will save me some headache if I was to request a retainer or a deposit or something like that, but I'm just not there yet. Lesson number 2 is to start working on processes that are going to be the foundation of your business. And this is not just your business practices, but also Arbitration reports, how you approach talking to clients, things like that. This is something that I'm very much working on, and actually one of my quarterly or monthly goals is to actually be very firm about following this process that I've created, specifically for how I want to approach my Arbitration reports that are related to construction. I can create all these checklists, I can create all these processes, and if I get an employee in the future, then they can follow these things. But if I, as a employer, am not following them myself, they're going to also see it as lenient. This is a hard lesson for me because I came from a company that was a little bit more scrambled. It was a family business, so that tells you it's a little hectic. But as one employee came in and moved away, they would add and leave ideas that they had, but there's no framework, right? There's no strong foundation for them to add these ideas. So it just ended up being like a pile, like a mess of how things get done. And at some point, you don't know what that purpose was anymore. So trying to record my processes, trying to follow them myself is pretty challenging because I know how to do the work. I just do it like this, right? But now I have to check, make sure that I've done all the things. And when I actually follow my procedure for a given task, I know that I've done it with 100% completion, done it to the best of my ability. And when I take a break from it, because that always happens, then when the client actually needs the final product, I know exactly where I was. So one of the sample projects is a city ordinances project. I live in a metropolitan area. There's a lot of cities around me, and every city has different requirements. So at my last company, I had started this document listing out what every single city wants, and then another arborist started adding notes to it. So like I said, it gets jumbled together. I decided to do that again for myself with a fresh format so that when I researched a new city, I knew that I was getting all the information that I needed. I was asking the city staff all the questions I needed, and it really just standardizes it. So I know that I have everything that I need. This is really important because if I hire employees in the future, they can just come in and follow these processes, right? And I'm not saying they're just gonna do boilerplate reports that are really generic, but that they could follow the process and have some limitations that help them work until they get to the point where they can do it without. Okay, and my last lesson, number 3, is to enjoy the slow periods while they're here, especially in the beginning when you don't have a lot of clients yet. And this one, I think I've been working towards it for a very long time. When I was in graduate school, I would spend a lot of time at the office, and I thought that that just made me a hard worker, and it didn't. It just made me overworked, if that made sense. The emergency fund also comes into play here. If you have savings, which is what I did when I first started, I made sure that I had the 6 months savings, then you can have the luxury of taking it easy in the beginning. And this taking it easy can also be used for number 2, right? Building your processes. It also protects you from those dips. And there's a lot of dips because the work is not consistent. There's really no pattern to it. So it protects you from the dips when you don't have work and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to have work again. And then all of a sudden you have a ton of work and it just ebbs and flows. And that's going to happen for the entirety of your career. So having that buffer means that if I need to help a friend move or something like that, which I've done, or if a friend's in town and they want to hang out, or I can just hang out with my dog or do hobbies, I can do all those things because I have plenty of money. If I don't work for a day or two or even a week, I'll be fine. I also have the luxury of being in an area that has a lot of work to support consulting. There's a lot of consulting arborists and consulting firms in this area, and there are also a lot of them that are reaching retirement age. That means that I can take my time now because eventually people are going to find out about me through word of mouth, and I'm going to have way more work than I know what to do with. It also, yeah, the fact that right now I have maybe 1 to 2 weeks of work at the most, whereas before it was, before at the previous company, it was more like 3 to 6. This means that I can take a break, right? I can go on vacation, I can do anything I want on a whim. I don't have to be worried about clients waiting on me and me knowing that once I finish this project, I just have another project waiting for me. There's no relief in that. So I'm going to do my best to take it easy. I think this practice is really helpful for maintaining mental strength during those times of uncertainty, because I've definitely heard from other arborists that they're really scared, anytime work drops, they're like, oh my God, is the work ever gonna come back? Whereas I'm like, oh hell yeah, I don't have to work today. I think it's definitely a different mindset, and to me it's a healthy one if you have the proper behaviors to back it up, like being able to save money and put it in an emergency fund so that you don't have to worry during those low times.